what's up, guys? Here on another episode of Eli and Mike. Right here, we have an amazing guest, filmmaker, producer, director. She's got so many titles.
Right.
We have Nadia Vouktchenvitch here with us today.
Yes, thank you.
Love it,
Hi,
love it.
thank you
Thank
for
you.
having me.
Thank you for
Anytime.
being here. We're so excited. And
I am too.
Yay, and you're looking
I've heard
so
so
shiny.
much about you both
Thank
and
you.
been already following you since I was introduced to you
my
by my
God.
dear friend Marlena,
Loves
who
it.
also has a number of brands and has been fortunate enough to come on your
Right.
podcast as well.
Yes, we
So
love
I'm
Marlena.
So
She's
grateful to
amazing.
also be here and
Loves it.
share a little bit of what I've
Love
been
it.
doing.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
it's nice to actually have you behind the filming because usually you're
Right.
actually you're in front of it now. Usually you're behind
Yes.
it. Right?
Yes.
How does that
Very
feel?
good.
How does that
Right.
feel?
Yes.
Because
Talk
now-
to
now
us.
that
The lights, the camera.
Yeah, so I have to say I'm not, I always get a little self-conscious when I'm in front of the camera.
Okay.
And ironically, when I was a little girl, they wanted me for Sesame Street. Like
Oh my gosh.
literally I was in nursery school, Bethlehem Day Nursery School in New York City. If
Okay.
you can believe how far back that goes. And my mom was like, "Do you want to be a movie star, or do you want to have children and be a mom?" And I'm like, "Are they gonna give me chocolate, like chocolate?"
Okay.
And
Okay.
then my sister Tatiana took me to the back room and
Yeah.
said, "Nadia, they're not gonna give you any chocolate. You're gonna have to just do as they say." And I was like, "Oh,
Oh
really?"
my
So I
God.
came back and I'm like, "No, I want to be a mom and have
Oh,
kids."
wow. Wow.
So my mom till this day always holds that against me.
Uh-huh.
Like you could, her being Filipina, they always
Mhm.
want the best for their
Yes,
children. They want
yes.
the best education.
Right.
You have to get straight A's,
Mhm,
nothing
mhm.
less. And they want, and especially as a woman of color, I now
Okay,
as a
yes.
mom myself can understand where she was coming from.
Right.
At first, when you're a teenager, you think, "Oh, why is she being so harsh?" Like
Mhm.
all my other white girl friends, their parents aren't like that. Like
Yeah.
not everyone, but most of them are not as
Yes.
intense. And
Right.
then you learn and you realize, but yeah,
They
you're
just want the
absolutely
best.
right.
There
Exactly.
you go. And your dad, is he also Filipino?
Well, no, my dad is actually from Montenegrin descent.
Okay.
And sadly he passed away, but he was
Yes,
very,
rest in
very
peace,
big.
rest in
Yes, rest in peace.
Yes,
His
yes,
birthday's
yes.
coming up,
Mhm.
as I mentioned earlier, March 27th.
Mhm.
And he was a very important figure in my life.
Yes.
He taught me a lot, where my mom taught me all about discipline and being organized and a lot about business too, even before I
Yes.
got my master's degree, in terms of make sure you always keep your
Mhm.
receipts, make sure you always get that person's name that you spoke to,
Yes.
like
Love
always
this.
checking all the
Uh-huh.
checklists off,
Right.
to protect yourself mostly, but
Mhm.
also to protect the other people that you're doing
Mm,
business
got it.
with.
Yes.
And so my dad, he just was like a really good father.
Yes.
And I think all of us here who are parents can relate to how important, especially when you're raising a young man, which I
Right.
am right
Yes.
now. It's really important to have that male role model, or
Yes.
just like a really strong father figure.
Right.
And people often say, it's not necessarily the father who fathers you, but the father who raises you.
Wow, that's
And
beautiful.
I think it's the same with women. So we really need to
Yes.
give, I always,
Mhm.
even on Mother's Day, I say,
Mhm.
and happy Mother's Day to
Mm.
all the single dads
Yes.
out there.
Right.
Because dads also have to be often moms and dads
Yes.
at the
Right.
same time.
I'm
you
definitely
know?
in that situation. We are, sometimes I'm the mom and the dad.
Yes.
And I'm like, okay, it's Mother's Day, and I'm like, Happy Mother's Day to me. So
Yes,
He's expecting the
exactly.
gift.
I'm like,
Yeah.
where's my flowers? No. So I get it.
Yes,
I get
yeah.
it.
No, and the same with my friends that are same-sex marriages
Mhm.
or partnerships, and like Charles recently met someone who has two moms, and I was like, oh, that's great, and I met
Yes.
them, and they were so well-read and musicians and
Amazing.
both educators as well. And there's always going to be questions behind it, but at the end of the day, I tell people, parents do the best they can. There's no
course.
manual out there. There's so many books,
That's right.
but everyone has to kind of take and leave behind what works for them and
That's
make the
right.
best out of it.
Yes.
agree.
Are you raising your son on your own at the moment?
Well, right now I'm fortunate that my long-term partner, whom I actually met through work, and he's a visual effects member, Visual Effects Society member, and also
Amazing.
an editor. And at the time, I hired him as a flame artist because I was working on a commercial, this campaign that I was producing for Daisy Sour Cream.
Ooh, wow. We
Yeah.
love Daisy
I
Sour
mean,
Cream.
I have
my
it in
God.
my fridge.
Right,
Yeah,
we
I
do.
use it a lot in
We
my
use it a
cooking
lot.
too.
It's good
Oh
for
my
my
God.
Doritos.
And I
Yes.
actually saw your commercial
Oh,
before
thank you.
I met you, and then I met you on, through social media. So I was like, she did that commercial.
Oh, that's so
I was
funny.
like, oh my
Yeah,
God.
no, and it's interesting because a lot of the people that I approached, that are flame artists, like by profession, they're like, what are you talking about? We don't understand what your client means. Ridges on the dollop, the actual dollop of the sour cream, not on the food, like the taco or the. And they were not understanding. They're like, we mean the flauta, or you mean like, rajas? And I'm like, no, it's the ridges on the dollop. And we even had a dollop Daisy specialist, this lady, she's a food stylist that they always hire for every shoot. And even I guess she had been a little tired that day. So, it happens when you're on long shoots, and we were like shooting overseas. And so in the end, I remember sending it to not to my knowledge yet, my soon to be partner and then eventually husband. And he immediately sent me a return email back with an actual, not just like, oh, I think I understand what you need, but it was like, is this what you were thinking about? And he already had a screen grab with it all done. And normally, they would charge me like over $2,000 just to do that normally, if it took them like even over an hour, because back in the day, those rates would go for like, in the thousands, every hour. And so I remember thinking to myself, gosh, my client's going to be so happy when she sees this. And sure enough, she's like, yes, you nailed it.
Love it.
Let's get them all fixed now, like that.
And that's how you started your relationship with your partner now?
Yes.
Husband?
Yes. He apparently, was checking out some Zara pants that I was wearing. It was like a nude color, kind of like off-white suit, because it was the middle of summer, and I was down in Tustin, and it was hot, in Orange County. And I guess I was like leaning over someone's computer, checking something out, and my husband just kind of saw me from the back, and he's like, oh, and who, but he was still then with his second wife, because, I'm 3, the charm one. I guess.
Right. Yes. 3 is a charm. 3 is a charm. Okay.
Yeah. I want more wife.
Wow.
Can I get another?
No, one's enough. One's enough.
Yeah. Right. Oh, well, sure. You have a whole harem,
Right.
Yeah. I have to say, I like when like at least my partners come with like experience of having been with other people and other different cultures and religions, and because it makes it so that much easier for me to be able to reach a point of like that kumbaya and that just kind of like ebb and flow, and you're just syncing, you're all syncing up, and nice harmony happening there in the relationship.
Because you get that wisdom from what he's gone through. You can already see yourself not challenging yourself as much.
I think so. And I think it's important to remain in a state of curiosity that you can always learn. Like if I sat here and said, I'm not in marriage therapy, I would totally be lying. Because the first year into our marriage, I think it was like almost up till I was like, Rob, we need to get counseling and marriage therapy. And I'm being on therapy, I even had my son during COVID lockdown when our poor kids were having to learn in their bedrooms on a computer with teachers who hadn't even been trained to teach online. Remember, none of these teachers knew how to teach online. And when you're teaching little ones, Lord have mercy, like good luck, because they can't hold that attention.
That's right.
And then they have parents in the background working, and then this device on, the television on. So my son went through a lot of, and like many children out there, just some were not very vocal about it, and you learned the hard way as a parent when they had like some major dysregulation. So I'm very big on therapy, and I think even when you know your partner, which we were dating for a very long time, just as friends, we go out to like art gallery openings, or we would go to the LACMA gala, so and so, or we would go see the ballet down in Circusstrom in Orange County, some modern dance, like Alan Alvey and all those ones that I love and admire. So we had a lot of that in common, and we were having so much fun as friends that for the longest time I'm like, I don't even want to like ruin this by getting any deeper or making it something more physical. And then as I slowly started to introduce him to my son, because I was very cautious as a single parent, and especially working in the industry.
It's not a son with
no. My husband, sadly, and he actually just published a book on infertility in men, which I'm really hoping, and if anyone hears this out there, he's looking for an agent and publisher, because I really feel that in the self-help market, and I worked in publishing just for like a summer when I was in college at Sarah Lawrence in New York at Lindsay Franklin Associates, and sadly she passed away of cancer, but her partner, Siegel and Associates, rest in peace, they continue on with the publishing firm. So they used to publish Deepak Chopra and Edward Brzezinski, so they did historic stuff, they also did spiritual, but they also did a lot of self-help. And so I was telling my husband, I have rarely come across a good book written written from a male perspective about infertility in men, like male infertility.
You don't hear about that all
you
the
see
time.
a lot of women writing,
Right.
lots of books out there.
Right.
You know, Barnes and Nobles, Amazon.
Yes.
You know, tons of them. So yeah, that's one thing that, you know, he struggled with. First they thought it was his first wife, and then they adopted their two first daughters, Emma and Sarah, who are now grown, and they have, you know, their own businesses and whatnot.
Amazing.
One lives in Australia, and the other one lives in Belfast in Northern
wow.
Ireland.
Oh my goodness,
Yeah.
all over the world.
And yeah, they came to the Zoom wedding as well. And then his second stepdaughter from his second wife, she you know, she was also from a previous marriage as well. So Charles is the first, I guess, male that he's raised, and you know, he's done a phenomenal job. You know, he's not the
Amazing.
type to go out and play basketball and rough it up like that.
Right.
But he's the type who says, oh, maybe we should go, and you know, and that's okay,
Love
because I
this.
think in the United States we need to embrace more the arts and
Yeah.
music.
Yes.
We push too much for sports, and if you're not
Right.
built like for sport, that's
mhm.
okay. You really have to tell, especially the young men out there,
That's
Right.
right.
it is okay
Right,
to
right,
be
right.
different, to be differently abled, you know,
Yes.
and just embrace it. And we really need to make, I think, out of sports less of a business, because often, sadly, your temple, which is your body, ends up being damaged early on, and it's a very short-lived career.
That's right.
And if you're not lucky to be able to be, like, say, a coach, or
Right.
even take ownership of that football team,
Yes.
what are you left doing?
That's right.
And the sad part is, a lot of these players think they're making millions and a lot of money, but really they're not making anywhere near as much as the owner
Right.
of the clubs
Oh
are.
my God,
Sure.
so
Yeah,
true.
and
so
all the
true.
sponsorships that those club
Right.
owners take, because they take a huge. I mean, I would know working in advertising. So.
Yes, yes, yes. Oh my
I
God.
want to touch base on something that's extremely. I think it's so interesting. So you had a Zoom wedding. I need
Yes.
to know more about this. So Zoom wedding, guys. What happened?
Yeah, so this is what it was, and going back to like the whole thing about my son, and you know, not being my husband, now my husband's biological son, we were in, you know, a custody battle. We continue to deal with it,
Oh yes.
and it's, you know, it's ongoing, it's work in progress. So he was, you know, threatening to take away full custody of my son, and I was always kind of like the anti-marriage. Anyone who knows me really well is like, oh no, Nadia's never gonna get married.
Right.
That's not her thing.
Yes.
I believe like in holding people for a certain amount of time, but not
Yes.
like having that be like, oh,
Right.
it's mine, you know. And that's hard for me to
Yes.
say as a Scorpio.
Okay.
that I
okay.
am.
You're a Scorpio.
Yeah, November
Hey.
2nd.
November
Okay.
3rd.
Right.
Okay,
There you
yes,
go.
I
Love it.
love
Love
me,
it.
my
The whole
Right.
field changed right.
Right. Right.
Yes.
Yes.
You feel- sorry,
Oh yes, yes,
No.
yes.
Yeah. I'm a Gemini.
Oh,
but,
that's
you
why
know.
we get along too. My
We're
best
besties.
girlfriends, and well, my son's biological father too
Okay.
was Gemini.
Okay.
so
Okay. So
I
we're
had
both.
a
We're both.
lustful night in which
Right.
we conceived my Libra
There you go.
son.
Okay.
Oh,
There you
goodness.
go. Right. Right.
Yeah,
Oh my
what that's
goodness.
all. It took apparently one time, but yeah,
Right.
no, I think that you know, Zoom weddings are very convenient, especially if you have, in my case, family all over the
around
world,
the world.
and you don't want to hear about the, oh my God, I have to put out 10,000 euros to go and, you know,
Yes.
attend your wedding, and then I have to fly my 3-4 kids, and
Yes.
you know, rent a car and get a hotel. So it saves a lot. I think it's definitely better for the environment. But I also think the beauty about technology, and the same thing I tell people about AI, like, you know, just find a way to coexist with it. Because, you know, artificial intelligence has been here for like decades already. In Asia, people have been using AI. Like, I just saw something on BBC late last night
Yes.
about a child playing chess with an AI robot, just the
Wow.
hand moving the pieces
Oh my
like this. And I'm sure
gosh.
that's something they maybe had for a long time, but I was
Yeah.
like, whoa, we should
Wow.
let Charles watch this, or
Yeah.
if he
Yeah.
loves
Yeah.
to play chess. So,
Mhm.
you know, when it comes to that, I feel like technology should be embraced and used to our benefit
Yes.
and to enhance us.
Right.
We shouldn't let technology dictate how you're
Mhm.
going to write your contract when you're going to be doing a huge $1 million movie.
Yes.
And you're like, oh my gosh, they're going to take my image and they're going to steal everything
Mhm.
about my, you know, my body and everything. No, you go to the table prepared to negotiate what you want. And if you're lucky, they'll meet you halfway, or
Love
maybe
that.
even closer to your goal. But like I said, don't be afraid of it. You know, so with Zoom, I think that beauty of during COVID lockdown, it allowed people to still stay in touch
Yes.
and to still have that sense of community, which so
Definitely.
many people were very depressed. People were like, you know, wanting to commit suicide. People were buying inflatable dolls. I watched a
Right.
short film the other day.
Yes.
Having
I've
a relationship with an inflatable.
Right. Yes.
Which, you know, hey, if that keeps you like semi-sane, I guess that's
Yes.
okay. But
you
so there
know.
were all kinds of stories. But yeah, the Zoom
Right.
wedding came about because I was like, look, I should just get married to you, and this way
Okay.
he will leave us alone, or maybe the
Mhm.
judge will be more look upon me more favorable, like, oh,
Okay.
she's finally got
Right.
personal life
Everything
together.
right, right.
And we don't have any cause
Mhm.
to take away. But also I felt like my son, you know how children, they have this fantasy of a perfect marriage.
Yes.
They don't care what walk of
Yes.
life you come from. They don't
Right.
care what color, what sexual
Mhm.
orientation, what have you.
Yes.
They just care about seeing, oh, I have like what they believe the fantasy of a perfect marriage
Right.
is,
Right.
and or you want to call it the fairy tale story.
Mhm,
But
mhm.
it helps give them, I guess, a sense of like home and grounding.
Correct.
And
Yes.
so I was like, well, maybe I should do that for my son's
Aw,
sake. And yeah, we
that's
had
beautiful.
125 people on it, and
Wow.
we recorded it.
Love
We
it.
even got a transcript of all the little comments that people popped up and the hearts that were
Oh
coming
my
up. My
God.
husband ended up, because he does visual effects, he ended up recreating them.
Yes.
So if you ever want someone to recreate them, he can do it.
Okay,
But
okay.
you and your husband were in the same room, though, right? At least you guys were together, right?
Yes, we were in the
Okay.
same room.
It
We
wasn't like he was on the Zoom too. Right?
No, thank God. No, that's a
Right.
very good question. We had already been like living together, isolated in our 1-bedroom, 1-bath condo at that point with our 2 doggies. One we adopted during COVID,
Yes, yes.
and then my son was with us too. And then the pastor came and stood 6 feet apart. Yeah.
Oh
Got
wow.
it.
Okay, he
And
was
our
6 feet
witnesses
apart.
were our neighbors. Yeah.
There. Okay,
It's
there you
interesting
go.
though that because there is actually such thing as a COVID Zoom wedding, which it makes sense at that time where nobody was really getting together. But I bet you there's still people that do that. I mean, I can imagine that, especially for people
Mhm.
that are different in different countries.
Yes.
A COVID
Just
Zoom
kinda
wedding.
come
That's
here.
amazing.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah, because
amazing.
we got invited to a wedding from one of my cousins who's going to be in Hawaii, and I'm like,
Oh,
are we going to be able to
nice.
make it?
And it's tough. It really
Nice,
is tough. It's a
yeah.
lot of
And
you know,
yeah,
a lot of
it's
so much going on.
expenses, and when you're
Right.
busy schedules and
So
multiple businesses that you're
yes.
running, I mean, yeah,
Right.
it's hard to make that time, and yet you still want to be there and show them that you care and you're
Yes.
showing up for them.
I
Right.
should
so-
send her a message. Hey, can I go on Zoom?
Yeah,
Right, shout out to
I
you
wonder
for
what she's
having
gonna
a,
say.
a Zoom wedding. But
Yeah.
another topic I want to touch on is something that
Yes.
you are huge in, which I'm just so inspired by you, is being in, you're a producer, correct?
Yes.
And can you touch on that? Like, how did you get into the producing world, and where are you at with that right now?
Yeah, so I kind of fell into producing kind of by accident. I know it seems bizarre, but I guess I continue to be very good at it for
Love it.
what my clients tell me.
Yes.
And come back for more work. But I originally had always, and I have gone back now more into directing. Of course,
Yes.
producing is more what I'm being known for
Mhm.
all these years. But directing is really where my passion is, and where I feel like I can be more creative.
And they're two different
And-
things, right?
Yes, correct.
Yes,
And
different
tell
worlds.
stories. Yes. In fact,
Mhm.
right now I'm looking, and I've been going to a lot of women in film and women in media events. We just had a sip and swap the other day
Okay.
up here in Hollywood,
What
where
is that? Sip and swap.
they kind of it's interesting. They made up this kind of like name for it, where you like it's kind of like speed dating
Okay.
with a variety of people, but it's more like a networking speed
Oh,
dating.
I like that.
Where you
Okay.
sit like 3 or 4 people, or maybe 5 at the same table, and you assign them a number, and then there's like kind of like a little printout of like 12 or 20 questions,
Mhm.
and you throw dice, and then whatever number it lands on, whoever threw the dice gets to ask the question. Everyone around the table
That's so
has
cool.
to answer it.
That's fun.
So
Love
it's a
it.
great way of icebreaker,
Okay,
and it
love
gets you to
this.
start to know about what people like, and not necessarily like, okay, what do you do straight up? Like, are you a
Right.
script
Okay.
supervisor? Or Are you
Yes.
a grip? Are you a camera woman or
Mhm.
DP? But yeah, there is a little bit of a difference. And so for me, I always like to like step back when I'm producing from the director, and also be their partner, but really try to help them achieve their vision.
Yes.
So then when I'm directing, I need a very strong woman or man producer, depending on who is fit for the job and based on merit, to support me in that regards. But it's
Wow.
definitely fewer headaches, because when you're producing, you're running all the budgets of every
Okay.
individual department,
Mhm.
and you're also running your global budget to stay on
Wow.
schedule and within the budget and the parameters that the client or the brand has given you. So if they're
Got
giving
it.
you $1 million, or they're giving you $5 million, or they're giving you 20,000
Mhm.
for a social media viral campaign,
Right.
you want to make sure you're always within budget,
Mhm.
and that if your art department says, oh my gosh, the director now wants this beautiful background and involves a smoke machine, and I need to
Mhm.
get a vintage car rented, and
Right.
I only have $1,000 or $5,000 or whatever it is, and now they need an extra 10,000. I'm having now to find ways to reallocate it, or go back to the client and explain to them, look, this is what you have in the
Wow.
budget?
Wow.
Okay.
Do you want to maybe compromise on it? So there's a lot of negotiating. There's a lot of dealing with different personalities that you have to
Yes.
kind of work out. And certainly, you know, a lot of stress involved in terms of like making sure you deliver on time.
Right.
For the because for example the Super Bowl that we just had recently,
Yes.
all those ads, just to give you an example, they run millions of dollars if not
right.
more,
Yes.
and that's just to produce them and, you know, post produce obviously, but the actual media buy of like going to the upfronts in New York and purchasing them a year in advance and making sure you get that 30 seconds for Amex
Wow.
or that 60 seconds for Jeep
Yes.
or whatever pharmaceutical company. You know, you look at those brands and they're mostly having celebrities in there too, so those
That's
celebrities
right.
are also getting paid upwards of,
Right.
you know, X amount. They're not getting
Right.
SAG scale for
Mhm.
sure for the
Mhm,
most
mhm.
part. And so, and then they're, you know, union jobs. So
Mhm.
they're, if they rerun again, then they're getting residual. So all that has to be accounted for in the budget.
Wow. And that's the
Yeah.
producing side of it.
Yes,
And
correct.
you are currently doing that, but what would you say the directing side of everything is?
Oh yeah, for me the directing, I feel like I have more room to just be more expressive and I just my happy place, you know.
Okay.
Whereas when I produce, it's more like the worry, you know, the, you know, really kind of making sure everyone's
Yes,
happy and
right.
and you're pleasing everyone in every different department. And you know I'm good at it, and I've you know been very successful at it, thankfully. But I also feel like directing is where like people will come up to me, whether they're at a casting even, and I haven't decided who I'm going to go with yet or who I'm going to call back yet. And they come up and they'll ask, "Who did you write the script? Or was this side something that you wrote? Or is this an excerpt?" And I'm like, actually, yeah, you know, I actually did write this. Or, you know, I'll give credit to whoever actually did write in that case. But those compliments that come from a sincere, from one artist to another, you know, that they
Yes.
really appreciate
Wow.
and they value. Because I know auditioning is the most, you know, awkward thing out there. And even as a producer sitting on the other side, I always am
Mhm.
very, you know, understanding and trying to
Wow.
be super humble. And then
Great.
anyone on this side of the table, if they even start to make any kind of comment that I find is totally inappropriate, I'm like, no, hold, you know, that is not
Love
okay.
this.
Wait till at least, you know, they close the
Yes.
door if you absolutely have to. But even then,
Wow.
I make sure that I let them know that this is a very vulnerable place that these wonderful artists put themselves in. So yeah, so normally I'll try to write what I direct.
Mhm.
In this case, for example, the docu-series, even though it's a documentary, right, you still have a certain amount of writing that's done.
Oh yes.
Starting with, like, for example, you gentlemen, the questions
Mhm.
today, you know, and
Yes.
so you'll have the research that you would have done ahead of time, a lot of reading perhaps on things
Yes.
that they've written
Mhm.
or published online. And if they're not online, then you have to go old school to the library.
You know,
Or
yes.
ChatGPT.
Yes, there you
Yes,
go,
okay,
ChatGPT,
right,
or
that helps.
microfilm,
Yes,
microfiche for
right,
old
right.
newspaper
Oh my God,
articles that
yes. Uh-huh.
were maybe photographed and kept somewhere. So yeah, you have to go deep into the archives. But I love to do research. I love to learn as much as I can about someone or something that I am like so drawn to
Love
and
this.
so magnetically attracted
Yes,
to. I have this
yes.
like insatiable hunger for learning and
Amazing.
knowledge and
Mhm.
history. I'm a huge history lover.
Love
Yeah.
it. Love it.
Thankfully my son is the same way. And but you know, historic you know, period films like biopics often require a lot of budget
Mhm.
because, you know, you're having to replicate, you know, history and those beautiful
Right.
costumes and outfits and
Wow.
those amazing cars and those amazing
Yes.
houses with that architecture, or you have to
Yes.
rebuild all of that if it doesn't
Mhm,
exist
mhm.
anymore. So all of that adds a lot of dollars to the production.
Yes.
But I just think it's so important to keep history present and to remember what our ancestors did to get us to where we are here,
Yes.
and to honor them by learning from what they passed down to us.
Wow.
And the knowledge and wisdom that they gave you, you know, through the generations. And, you know, whether it comes to medicine or whether it comes to spiritual healing, what have you.
Mhm.
It just is something that I feel like we can't forget that. We need to constantly remind ourselves of
I
the
love that.
importance of
I
history.
love that
yeah.
so much.
Being
Yes.
the director is pretty much like being the ruler or king and queen of the entire thing that's happening.
Is that
That's
right?
correct.
The whole event.
Yeah,
wow.
for the
The
most
whole
part,
recording.
yeah, very
Okay.
good. That's correct. For the most part, the director or the woman director, they will have final say. It's rare. Okay, so in the cases where it isn't is when it's normally, you know, a huge company, should we say, or platform or studio.
Is it like Sony or something?
Yes, where you'll have executives at the top level, and then those executive producers as well coming in and making final decisions on a cut. So that part is unfortunate, and that's also why I think people like Sean Baker, who just won all these awards and the Academy Award as well for Best Picture with Lenora, and he's originally coming from talking about a casting background along with his wife Samantha, whom I hugely admire as another fellow Asian woman in the business.
Love it.
That they really, really are calling out to everyone in this business, saying, look, independent film is at risk of becoming obsolete yet again. And the fact that he had to shoot in Brighton Beach, which again, that's New York City's my hometown. I used to go to Brighton Beach all the time to hang out with my Russian mafiosos, or just to practice my broken Russian, pick up a VHS or a this is back in the day, Betamax of some movie that underground that no one had heard of. This is before DVDs and Blu-ray and everything available on iTunes and Amazon. But he was saying how he had to shoot guerrilla style, and this is an accomplished director who has a number of well-known movies, at least in the independent film world, that many of us have seen, who is having to confess to another fellow filmmaker, the director of The Brutalist, during an interview that I watched, where they were both very concerned about the future of independent cinema. And when Brady himself, the director of The Brutalist, had said on stage, winning the Golden Globe, that he's like, I thank my producers here on stage, but he's like, but I also feel that it's important to acknowledge how directors need to have the final say, because he's like, no one believed I could do a 3-hour film that would have an intermission. No one believed that I would be able to make a film on 70 millimeter or 60 millimeter film. He actually shot on 35 and then he blew it up, and that was with Vistacolor. But so he was saying how he really had to fight in few words, but without having to be like that obvious about it. Because that was millions and millions of people watching him across the world. So I think that that's something that we really need to realize, that to be able to have that creative license nowadays, you really have to go through a lot of obstacles still, unless you choose to go the route of like, okay, you're going to self-fund, you're going to get friends who really believe in your project, who happen to have money, available to invest, and they're not worried about not getting an ROI, their return on investment. Because oftentimes, you have to just tell people straight up, independent film, don't expect an ROI per se, because that's just how it is. If you want a blockbuster hit, what we used to call blockbuster hit, you're going to get an A-level celebrity, and for sure. And that's also how they sell the rights in Europe first. So they sell those foreign rights, which they, allow then to fund the film. Amazing. Because they know, okay, well, who's going to be it? Demi Moore. Okay, perfect. Yes. Oh, Emma Stone. Okay, great. Ryan Gosling. Yes. And they have no problem coughing up whatever it is, millions in advance, even though you haven't shot even 1 minute of your film, but they know that you have this celebrity already signed on and committed to it along with their agent. So that's another thing that directors don't have to do, is worry about contracts.
There you
Producers, we have to look at every contract. Oftentimes we draft them. We work a lot closely with the agents, the managers, the PR people, their entourage. We also look through their wish lists of like all the requirements prior to going on any film set.
That's a lot.
They call them like writers as well, and believe it or not, you have those on commercials too. When dealing with obviously celebrity or even B-level
like Super
celebrities.
Bowl or whatnot.
I've often found them. I've been very blessed that I've worked with amazing. Well, I consider them all A-level.
Yes. Okay.
But
love it.
Even some that are not so much. I find that sometimes it's the people in the middle that often can be the more should we say challenging to work with, but you just have to find a way, I think, as a producer. And I think those people skills and communication skills are really important. Definitely. Because sometimes they might be on a power trip, which is okay, but we're always like, hey, this is about the project, and we all want to make a good project here, whether it's a film, a commercial. Let's all see how we can move forward and make this work.
And kind of like kind of like Eli was stating how you're like the king or the queen of the whole production or project or what's going on. How does it feel like when you're seeing everyone on the red carpet and they're like the ones that are being like the pictures taken of and whatnot, but in reality it's like you kind of were like the producer, or you were like the director,
That's a very good point. Yeah, my first thought is, gosh, I'm so glad that I don't have to put on those Spanx or anything to tuck in my midsection.
Okay.
The
Yeah.
poor women
Right,
torture
right.
themselves,
No,
like the
yeah.
girdle back in the day. or-
Yes, yes.
But even after I gave birth, I was like, oh my gosh, I can't put this thing in. All my
Okay.
Latina girlfriend, no, go to Colombia and get this done, and go to
Right.
Mexico, and they hacen unos, you know, they te van a sobar así, like a massage that they're gonna work all that stuff out. And I'm like, no, I just like everything. You know, I'm like hippie
You're
that way.
right.
But
Yeah.
yeah, no, you're right. You do feel like, are they gonna give me a shout out or not?
Right.
But I think for the most part, people who are well versed in the business and are, you know, humble enough, they often bring up, like, at least during the Q&A at the
Mhm.
beginning, like when the film's starting to premiere and it's
Okay,
just starting to get
yes.
out there, you know,
Right.
or West Coast premiere versus a worldwide premiere. They
Mhm.
normally are decent enough and kind enough to bring up the producer at least,
Yes.
and then a number of the cast who may be in the audience to come and join the Q&A.
Yeah.
I've had situations where I've worked with directors where they did not want to do that.
Oh no.
And that's okay. I ended up hiring my own PR person
Okay.
and putting out that money and having her make sure that, you know, interviews would happen for me as well.
Yes.
Because, you know, when you work a lot, especially
Yeah.
in independent cinema, when you're doing, like we mentioned earlier, pro bono work that's coming out of your own pocket and you're not getting paid for, where you're putting in more time and money, that translates on paper as way more than you're actually getting paid
Oh,
over
right.
a course of X amount of years.
Yes.
It's
You
just
know,
like a shot of an opportunity that you maybe
Yes.
might get somewhere, right?
Yes, exactly.
Wow.
And so it's an investment in yourself at the end of the day, but it's also, you know, you're making sure that you're paying forward the investment that you made prior when a film,
Right.
because often you'll see them on the red carpet like, oh my gosh, their hair is like short now, or he just grew a mustache, or look,
Mhm.
Timothée has a little beard
Yeah,
and
yeah.
goatee, you know. He didn't have that when he was doing
Right.
Bob Dylan and whatever.
Yes.
And it's because, you know, they did it way back when, and theirs
Got
I think
it.
was at the tail end when they started shooting of COVID lockdown, and
Mhm.
so they even had to
Wow.
stop at one point.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and you know, he met with a director over Zoom and all that. You know,
Yes,
that was
right.
very convenient.
Uh-huh.
But for a while there, he was like, I don't know if it's gonna get made. I don't know if I'm gonna
Uh-huh.
fit it. You know, Timothée, because he was like
Yes.
also. I thought I pronounced it the French way because
No, I like it.
I just love French.
Yeah.
It sounds so good, and he
Right.
is totally fluent in French as well.
Uh-huh.
My son's obsessed with Timothée
No.
Chalamet.
I
too.
love him too.
He was so
Yeah.
happy when he won
Okay.
for Dune
Yeah.
and all those, and SAG for Best
Mhm,
Actor.
mhm.
I was
his
like,
suit was on point though.
The yellow
yes.
suit at the
Oh my
Oscars. I
gosh,
was like,
that is
okay.
a lucky color.
I was like, I'm in
kid
love.
you not. And it was already Bring On Spring,
You
Bring
know,
On
right?
Summer.
It
we
was.
need
I
that
was like,
hot.
okay, we needed
And
this.
he brought his mom,
you know,
which I
okay.
think is his lucky charm,
Yes,
because
okay.
the time he brought his mom, instead of, well, I'm not going to name
Right.
names,
Okay,
but
yes.
having his mom on his
Yes.
arm, I felt
Mhm.
like she brought him luck,
Mhm.
and he was so appreciative of getting the
Mhm.
SAG award as an actor. I think that was a
Yes.
huge thing for him, and he's a
That's
very
right.
humble person. The few
Right.
times that I've interacted or met him, you know,
Mhm.
briefly in person, he's a
Yes.
very humble person.
That's
But yeah, I
awesome.
feel like even when it comes to those categories, we should have one for the up and coming talent, kind of like the
Mhm.
BAFTAs have,
Mhm.
and then some for people over 50 and 60. And this goes
Oh, I
for
see.
all, you know,
Mhm.
LGBTQA, like all
Yes.
across the board.
Right.
It should be, you know, and we shouldn't separate them, you know, by, of course, by how you identify, like gender, like it shouldn't be. It should be
Mhm.
based
Right.
on talent.
Yeah.
And
Of
so
course.
I disagree with a lot of things that came out about, you know, Emilia Perez and all
Mhm,
that, and some even male actors saying, oh, how
Yes.
dare the Academy and which, like, even or for Carla to even accept the nomination. That's nothing
Mhm.
to do with, you know, the individual who's an artist. I think definitely we have to separate the categories when it comes to age bracket,
Mhm.
because they have so much more experience.
That's
and I
true.
can appreciate that and that now, you know, my ripe old age or young, you know, youthful age, you know, because it does take a lot of training, and it does take a lot of failed attempts. And just keep going and never
Mhm.
giving up, to then when you finally reach that point, like someone like, you know, Ralph Fiennes, for example, in Conclave, you know, I mean, he's an incredibly humble person, but, you know, he's competing with, you know, someone like Timothée Chalamet.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
You know,
right.
it's kind of like, you know, is that, you know, and so
so
I
much
just
of
think,
it
Yeah, maybe
know.
they should use the BOFT example, whereby
Mhm.
you do have a separate category for we used to call outbreak talent,
Okay.
up and
Oh,
coming
yes,
youth,
right.
aspiring,
Yes.
whatever they want, however they want to call or name the title. But it just allows for those more seasoned actors and
Mhm.
artists to have an opportunity to finally get an award themselves.
Yes.
You also created, I don't know if you created or directed a film called, hopefully I didn't I'm going to slay this wrong, Nita Child?
Yes, Vera Chai.
Vera Chai.
Yes, no, you got it right.
Okay,
Loves
good.
it.
Nita Chai. I don't know, what
Yeah.
language is that?
Well, she's originally, so her mother is Korean
Uh-huh.
and her father is Polish Jewish.
Mhm.
And then she was born in Manila. So
Mhm.
much like my mom, she's
Wow.
like originally, from Manila, although her mom is South Korean.
Mhm.
And her father, kind of like my father, who was also, Slavic, or in my case, Serbian, and hers was Polish. So yeah, no, I started, that's the first episode of a series of, I'm hoping to be at least 20.
Amazing.
With a long list of women that I have that includes, Ali Wong, Mindy
Wow.
Kaling, Mira Nair,
Loves it.
Yoko Ono, Vera
Okay.
Wang.
Yes.
I love her wedding
Okay.
gown.
Right.
And all
We
her
love her. We
designs.
love
And she
her.
went to my alma
Yes.
mater as
Oh
well.
my God, yes.
And I have May Pang, who used to be Yoko Ono and John
Mhm.
Lennon's
Mhm.
personal assistant.
Amazing.
And she is also, because she's still alive, a music producer.
Yes.
And a great photographer, and she's actually touring the country right now with her photographs. So she's the next wonderful, powerful, and
Wow.
inspiring Asian woman, which is part
Wow.
of the name of the
Yeah.
series
Yes.
that
What
I'm
a
hoping to
amazing
film.
project.
And that's one. Thank you. And that's one of
Yes.
4 that I'm working on. The second one being Mujeres Poderosas Inspiradoras Latinas, so powerful
wow.
Latina women.
Okay,
Oh,
that
okay.
hold on,
also
how did you say?
inspire-
Are you Mexican? I didn't know that.
You know, I
Because you
lived
said it
in.
pretty-
It's so
you're
good. It's so good.
sweet. So I lived in a small town in Spain for like 8 years, when
Oh.
I was like 9 going on 10 through 14 going on 15.
Okay.
And believe it or not, my Spanish was this bad. Like, hola, yo me llamo Nadia, una Coca-Cola or Fanta Naranja.
That might
por
be me right now.
favor.
Yeah.
I was
And he's
like,
Mexican.
no entender. Like, it was really bad.
Yes.
And on top of that, the little town we happened to live in was in the south of Spain, where the weather is very much like here, by the way. It's very
Mhm.
dry. They always have droughts. It doesn't get really cold in the winter, so it's always ripe for like fire seasons. You have to be really careful in terms of like sparks and things like that. So I lived there, and they actually speak another regional language, which is Valenciano. My parents didn't know this when they
Wow.
moved us there, so we had to
Okay.
learn to speak Valenciano before we even
Yes.
started school that summer.
Wow.
Or at the end of the summer when we had to go back to school. And we also had to learn the official Valenciano in school, because since it's part of the infrastructure and the education, and
It
it's
was
so
needed.
embedded in the society, and
Right.
keeping, talking about the history and
Wow.
the language and the
Mhm,
culture,
mhm.
preserving the folkloric aspect, we had to
Yes.
also learn Valenciano and Castellano. So in Spain, as you probably know, they speak Vascuence, which actually most people call it Vasco, and even the Spaniards call it Vasco. And I
That's
was corrected
amazing.
by my profesora de literatura española that it's
Oh,
actually
wow.
Vascuence, not Vasco.
Okay,
So they
corrected.
speak Gallego, Vascuence, then they have Catalan in Barcelona and all the País de la Cataluña, and then they have Valenciano, which is spoken in Alicante, which is where my little town was, out of that province of Alicante, and Murcia also speaks Valenciano, and then you have Castellano, which is the official Spanish that
There you go.
was then transplanted, should we say, into other countries and beautiful places in the world where both the Spaniards and the Portuguese decided to invade and conquer. But ironically, I didn't know this until recently, but Portuguese is actually apparently the 3rd most spoken language in the world.
Wow.
Yeah.
I didn't know this
I
till
had
now.
no idea. Yeah, and I
Yeah.
guess because they're the men who were navigating and conquering, or sponsored to go and conquer other countries. But they actually the Portuguese were actually better at it than the Spaniards.
There you
So,
go. Okay.
yeah.
I'm assuming the first one's English, or am I wrong?
I think English, yes.
Okay.
I believe you're correct. English, and also English is the official language of the European Union, which
Yeah.
everyone was like, that's odd, because the UK is not really in it totally. I mean, they were, but they never use the euro. They always use the British sterling pound.
Yes.
And so, which is always almost twice as much as a dollar. I always have that little bone to pick with them, and the Swiss as well, because the Swiss are smart. That's the Bank of Europe, and so. But yeah, they definitely. I thought that was an awkward choice. I understand why, because of the United States, possibly, but I felt like it should have been like a more colorful language, like Italiano or French, or even German.
And you speak 5 languages, correct?
Yes, actually, I'm rusty in a few of them, but rusty.
Rusty.
I haven't practiced. Yes, good. I like your sense of humor. That's a Scorpio in us.
Right.
Anytime I want to practice, I'll like I said, I'll get into I'll go to a community where I know they speak it, or
Smart.
I'll
Love
go
it.
to an area where I know, even in the United States, that I can immerse myself again in it. It's kind of like riding a bike; you'll pick it up again. But a lot of
So
it had
cool.
to do with traveling and out of necessity. But
Mhm.
also, my grandparents were in the diplomatic field. So my grandmother, my namesake, was married to my grandfather, where my last name comes from, and he was one of the founders of the Secretariat General of the League of Nations. And the reason why he wanted to be involved in that was because he was all about promoting peace, and having survived first the Balkan War when he was very, very young.
Wow.
And seeing his family go through that horrible loss, and then the First World War when he was only 13 or 14.
Oh my gosh.
And managed to go, through the retreat and nearly starved to death or died of frostbite when they reached the island of Corfu. Yeah, these are things. That's why I say it's so important to remember history, and this is why I think it's absurd to be having wars that we have sadly these days.
Yes, agree.
And I am so grateful that my grandparents are in fact no longer with us, because if they were to see what's going on, they would be so, I can only imagine fuming about
Right.
haven't we learned already,
Exactly.
so
Too long.
to go back to that, they had to learn a lot of languages to be able to be effective in their jobs as diplomats. And my grandmother, I remember hearing from my father that she spoke German, she spoke Russian, she spoke Finnish, she spoke Swedish, she spoke Norwegian.
Wow.
So again, I tell people, especially my friends here in the US, if we had a language per each state that we live in, we would all probably know at least 4 or 5 languages too.
Makes sense.
And in Europe, the only reason really why is because they can move around now more than before, since the European Union was formed back in the day. And it's just easier for them to have work that way as well.
And what are your 5 languages?
Yes. So I like to think I speak English.
You do.
Although I
Speak
do dream and write my poetry in Spanish, and I have
Okay.
written many of my scripts in Spanish too.
Love it.
I find that it's a more passionate
Wow.
language, and there are more variety of words, and they're more jugoso, juicy words to use when you're describing
Yes.
something. And it's kind of like when my mom would be cooking and she would swear in Tagalog, her
Okay.
native language, versus swearing in English, because it
Right.
didn't have that
Yeah,
that accent.
exactly.
Like
Yes.
puñeta and buise,
Right.
and how you
Yeah.
got, he knows, yeah.
He knows.
And we're like, ooh, so
Like, she
we're all
just
like,
told me that
oh,
yesterday.
dinner's not gonna be tasting too good
Right.
tonight. We
It's gonna
all
be
better
spicy.
have some crackers
Yeah,
or cereal.
right,
They're
right.
like,
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, so it would be English and then Spanish, which I really feel more at home in Spanish, and mainly because I spent very formative years as a young woman growing up in Spain. And,
That's
I
amazing.
became, I went from girlhood to, womanhood, I guess,
Right.
there. And I just experienced a lot of what racism really meant and felt like, what discrimination meant and felt like, what, someone calling you negrita, even though you're like, but wait a second, my skin is not even that color. And I just
Yeah.
came from Haiti, and
Yeah.
all my friends in Haiti are black, and even they didn't call me negrita,
Mhm.
or like gitano, or, go back to where you came from. And this
Yeah.
was in the 80s,
My
and this
gosh.
was a small little town, and they were very provincial. They hadn't traveled out of, most of them out of even the province of Alicante, and some of them had barely even gone to Barcelona, Madrid. So often my dad and my mom would be like, they would explain to us, you have to understand this is, mainly out of just lack of experience and knowledge and possible ignorance.
Mhm.
But it still is
Great
painful and
teachings.
hurtful. Yes, great teachings.
Right.
But it can leave some scars, and that's why I think, again, going back to therapy and all that is very important.
Right.
So when we lived there, I also had to learn Valenciano for that particular La Comunidad Valenciana, which also includes those cities that were horribly flooded just a couple of months back
I've seen
during
that.
La Dana, because that's a big thing during the winter time that happens too. And now it's coming at more intense and more frequent, just like the hurricanes in Florida. So climate change is really real, and we all really need to adjust our way of approaching it.
Signs are
and
there.
for a long-term thing. It's not just a season, it has to be year-round, kind of like what Kamala Harris said right after the fires here that happened. So so there would be Valenciano and then Catalan, because when we were studying in school, so Catalan, the reason why it's preserved written is because they had more resources. So they're connected with France, and they had better infrastructure, better economy, better trade in terms of mercantilism and doing business, because they had that border with France. Valencia did, but they had the port, so you still had to send ships out, and you risked the ship sinking or getting bombarded or taken by pirates and whatnot. And it was a big port for the Romans during back in the day, the Roman Empire. But Barcelona always had that advantage, right? And that's also why Catalonia doesn't want to be part of Spain. And I honestly think that they should just let them be independent and just have kind of like un convenio económico, like where they have some kind of strong contract whereby you continue to contribute X amount to our gross national domestic product, which is really what it boils down to at the end of the day. That's really why they won't let them go.
Yes.
But all that bloodbath, it's so senseless and a waste of human life, for every time they fight. Yeah, exactly. And I parlo catalán, even when I'm in the little town, they say, "Che, Nadia, es que parlas el Valencia como una catalana," like you speak you speak Valenciano like a catalana. And then I tell las abuelitas, because it's normally the grandmas in the town that are, they have all the time in the world. They're just chilling.
Okay,
They've already retired. They're not working or even trying to, and good for them that they don't have to, because their social services infrastructure allows them to retire.
Yes.
But they were always make fun, and I'm like, look, it's because I had to learn literatura catalana in school. I was forced to learn. Again, they had the ability to scribe. So scribes are very important, to write down their history and to record it. Whereas in Valencia, they were not as economically privileged, and so they had to orally transmit it to keep that history going. And so actually, when I was living there was a group of people that were hired. They got a grant through, I guess, La Comunidad Valenciana, to preserve all las canciones folclóricas that las abuelas and even las tatarabuelas, or even if the great grandmother was still alive, still remembered before their memory would go, so they could document it. Kind of like remember Spielberg used to go around recording the Holocaust survivors' stories, even though he didn't do a full-on film about each one. He had this. I remember he had a fund that he was using to make sure he documented all of that, which of course is very important to have, because you don't know how long we all have here on Earth. And I do think that parents and grandparents of that generation were made out of a different material, because they were survivors, for real.
Like you shake their hand and it feels like you're shaking, I don't know.
We can't even go out and get out of our car and it's cold and we're like, oh no.
I know.
Like, why am I so cold?
Yes.
Like, this is hard. This is hard.
Oh no, my husband's mom lived in London in a 3-story house all by herself. She beat cancer of the breast. She beat cancer of, I don't know how many different cancers they gave her, or the doctors told her she had. And whether it was true or not, and then she still had what you call her ciggy every other day, and her glass of port, and the Milla chocolates. Yes, shout out to Christina Milla chocolates in Culver City. I love her chocolate. Next time I'll bring you.
Yes, we're gonna go visit you, Christina. We're gonna go visit you.
Yeah, really good quality cacao. And I would FedEx those over to London, and she loved the ones with the Valencia dried orange inside. Of course, I would lie about it being perishable, because if not, they wouldn't take it.
Okay, perfect.
But she used to have the nibble on that. And let me tell you, she lived till 93.
Wow.
And, she survived the Blitz. And I don't know if you saw that movie that just came out recently that was all about the Blitz as well. And, I can only imagine what, she lived through. But she was such a strong, powerful woman. And I really do believe that people that were born at that turn of the century, like the 1900s, kind of like my grandfather, they were just so strong and resilient. And we can really take a page from their books. And I think even my son's generation can, and Alpha, which now have trillions of power of acquisition, buying power, that they can really learn a lot from them. So so it's Valenciano, Catalan, and then I do speak some French. I speak Creole because I lived in Haiti for 5 years, and their official official language is Creole.
Wow.
And it's kind of like an influence between patois from like the Congo, because many of the people, sadly, the slaves they were brought as slaves, but they were originally from Congo, brought over either by the French or the Spaniards to Haiti, because Haiti was actually populated by people that were natives, like an indigenous people that very much like our, here in North America, our Sioux and Navajo and Cherokee, all the different nations and tribes. And so they had like the almonds, the olive, the almond skin, the almond shaped eyes, like very, kind of like how I look, I suppose, or Hawaiian.
Okay.
And they would hide in the mountains. They were very protective of themselves because they had experienced so much trauma over the centuries. So you would rarely even see, this is back in the 80s when we lived there, you would rarely ever see them come into the main cities to buy anything that they possibly could need, because they were very self-sufficient. And there were very few, sadly, because, they were exterminated pretty much, sadly.
And you were living there?
Yes, when we lived in
Wow.
Haiti. Yeah. So that's why the majority of the population in Haiti, of course, looks, to be African, but the mix of the languages, like a patois between Congo and French, because, the French obviously conquered it until Toussaint Louverture, who was featured in the last Black Panther movie. I love how they reference that too, because I've always wanted to do a documentary on Toussaint Louverture, who managed to get the independence for Haiti long before this whole side of the hemisphere of the world did.
Yes.
So it's unfortunate how a lot of countries want to dominate these little beautiful islands, and they have to really fight hard. And so those would be the language. I do speak a little bit of Italian. I can kind of like get by. I have a lot of Italian friends and family. I have two cousins that are half Italian, half Filipino. And then, I've always wanted to learn German, but Russian is the other language that I studied when I was in college. And that's the one that's the most difficult, I find, to learn. And that one's one that I'm really rusty.
That's amazing. You've been all over the world. You're a mother. You are a producer. You are
you're
Nadia Films. Like literally your own company, Nadia Films.
Yes,
so
that's
amazing.
So sweet. Thank you. Well, I do hope you enjoy these.
Oh no,
caps.
we are going to wear it. These are so cool. I love the
I give
colors.
these to my clients at every shoot. I'm like, this is to protect you if we're having to do any outdoor shoot and you're not using all the sunblock that I have for oily skin and dry skin and combo skin.
And they're actually really cool. Like I want to wear it right now, but I just want to mess with my hair right now. But also, we were talking about Daisy. You did a Daisy commercial.
Yes.
You've also worked with amazing individuals like Paul Mitchell and did so many.
Yes.
Can you talk about like some of the biggest people you've worked with?
Oh, yeah. So Paul Mitchell, that's a wonderful brand. And that's also coming through, the partnership that I have with my husband and his relationship with Paul Mitchell. So this is Advanced School System. So this is the side of Paul Mitchell that helps educate all the aspiring hairstylists.
Yes.
And they provide all the videos that are training videos to help, teach them how to do a perm or how to do even a French braid or, a blowout or, what have you. And so we actually were contracted to do upwards of 120 videos.
Wow.
And and we had about a week and a half to 2 weeks to shoot all the videos.
Oh my goodness.
Prep time was about 2 or 3 weeks. We were lucky that this all happened. The last shoot we did right before the strike. So it was at the very beginning of the strike. So there was more availability for everything. So it wasn't as hard as if you had to book things short, last minute, during, regular, very healthy industry in the film business.
Yes.
So, but with that too, having said that, we take pride as a company in that we will never try to cheap out on rates, or try to take advantage like some companies do, whereby, there's a strike going on, so I'm going to really try to squeeze you and pay you a quarter less or even half of what your normal rate is. For us, we're very big on making sure, and this is something I've done throughout all my career, even when I'm working mostly in the Spanish speaking market or the multicultural market, whereby I'm always honoring their their rate, their union rate. So, you know, say if you normally make 1,500, I'm like, okay, this is what I have, 1,450. Can you meet me there? Or 1,400, I'm giving you multiple days of work.
That's great.
Can you meet me there? And they're like, yes. And then it's like, is there an agent involved? Like, okay, we got to negotiate that.
Yes.
Normally for non-union, you go direct to, you know, it just depends on what their situation and their deal is with their agent. But I felt like it was really important. I told my husband and my business partner, I'm like, we really need to sacrifice our own salaries to be able to make sure we can keep all the crew and their extended families in business and also do good value work, you know, for our client. Because he's had this client for upwards of 12, almost 15 years.
Wow.
Yeah, Paul Mitchell. And they're amazing. They're incredibly talented. All the stylists that we work with, and there's about 15 of them that we have to film doing different things. And each video normally lasts up to 20 minutes.
Wow.
Because as you know, any of us who've had to go to the hairstylist or, you know, hair salon, anything you have done takes time, whether it's color processing. And so we had to have multiple cameras. We even had motion control camera as well that has to be calibrated, so it's a very highly technical rig as well, and it has to have its operator, but then the other multi cameras that are handheld, so it all has to capture. It's like when you blow up a car in a film, you don't have multiple chances of doing that because it's very expensive to blow up a car. Also, from my perspective, it's just dangerous, period. Whether you have a stunt person, most likely you have to have, and a stunt coordinator or not. But it's just one of those things where you have to capture it from multiple angles. But yeah, we love the Paul Mitchell client. We hope they come back. We know it's very different from the brand itself.
Yes.
They have, you know, for the most part, larger budgets, and they film more often. The school is doing it for longevity too, and to sell. And we've produced them in many languages. I think there's upwards of 30 or 40, 60 maybe languages that we produce for all countries all over. It's incredible how many people learn all over the world from those videos. So it gives us a lot of pride, and we certainly do hope to do more work with them. And you know, that's how I started working with Marlena as well.
Yes.
You know, she came on to help us out and did an amazing job as well.
She's amazing. We love Marlena.
You know, we at one point, she's so talented and so special. And we at one point had to break out into 2 units because they added a couple more videos on, and we didn't have really the space in the largest studio at Smashbox Culver. And shout out to my Smashbox folks.
There you go.
Because the other 2 studios were already actually booked at that point. And they had like print shoots happening there, and so
they made it work though.
Yeah, they totally would have worked. I was like telling my husband, look, we're gonna just divide the studio in half. I'm like, I'll run Unit B, you run Unit A. You get to stay in the control room with one of the lady clients, and I'll take the other lady client here. And so we kind of tried to get into sync, because the moment, you know, if I cut camera, he cuts camera, everyone already starts talking on his unit, and I'm like still in the middle. Even though we weren't shooting necessarily live sound, we did have to capture like some things of like sound effects, or like the lady kind of like she was on a mic just kind of like walking the stylist through what they had to do next. Because remember, these stylists, they're used to doing it in real life, but they're not necessarily actors. So it's kind of like working with real people that you cast off the street, and you're trying to training and teaching them how to act as you go along. But they did amazing, considering many of them some of them hadn't done it before. A lot of them had, but it had been a long time. So we're very, very grateful to have clients like that. And we do hope to bring more very much like that as well.
I think you're going to have all of so many different type of clients like this, huge names, especially because you're so amazing.
I mean, your resume is so mind-blowing. You have so many things going for yourself. Your own company. You have so much experience directing, producing. You're creating actors. Hopefully everything works out with the independent film. I know that that's something that, like you said, has been affected. But I feel like, you know, movies are I mean, we're in Hollywood, we're in LA, we're in Beverly Hills. That's everything. Like, we love watching films. Right. But, you know, we love that you're here on our podcast. I mean, I can't believe we almost hit an hour already.
Oh, my gosh.
Literally
I know. When you're having fun, time flies.
Right, yes. We're going to ask just 2 more last questions because they're so important for our audience to be able to, like, pull this out of you. What was one of your, like, because everything that you're speaking of, it all sounds so amazing. You're learning languages, you're going around the world, you're producing, you're directing, everything. Oh my god, I love it all. But what was like one of your harder times in your life where you were just like beat and you were just, I can't go on anymore, but then you were able to snap yourself out of it. And like, what made you snap yourself out of it?
That's a very good one. I think there are a number of times in my life that I felt that way. And I was like, gosh, how am I going to pull myself out? And I also have, I have to be very transparent about how important mental health is.
Yes, please.
And I think, and this is going to come out of my memoir. As I mentioned earlier, I've been working on a memoir and I have close to like 300 pages and I'm only a quarter way done through my life. But I really want to, come clean and transparent about my own battles with that, and knowing that there is a history of that. And also on my dad's side, the mother's side, so my grandmother, her mother's mother, she had a lot of struggle with mental health, and I actually discovered an article written in German about how she ended her life.
Oh my goodness.
And then my grandmother's sister, she was younger than my grandmother, and beautiful, gorgeous. I mean, my gosh, if you were to see the pictures, I have some on Facebook, and she actually was found at Hôtel de Crillon, and this is in Paris, in Paris, which is one of the Rosewood hotels, just like the one up in Montecito, Miramar. And she was found dead in her hotel room. So, and everyone was like, oh, she had a botched abortion, they said, oh, she died of a broken heart, or, oh no, she was left by a foot soldier and that he was beneath her class. And that was very embarrassing because she was the younger sister of my grandmother, who was an heiress to the Treugolnik factory. They were industrialists in Russia. And so they manufactured rubber in India, and they also did like tobacco and all that. But it's separate from what Belgium did in Africa and Congo. So I need to be very clear about that, because my grandfather actually was in service himself in Hamburg. He came to America with his savings, learned how to chemically produce rubber, and then sourced it out of India.
Wow.
And then set up his factory in St. Petersburg in Russia, which then sadly the Bolsheviks took over and they made it Krasny Treugolnik. So they confiscated everything, and of course they lost everything. But going back to mental health, I think it's very important that when we have those very down times, like I experienced it right after the fires, for example.
Oh wow, recently.
And I remember telling my husband, who was having very, very hard time breathing, as well as my son who has mild asthma, we need to leave, especially when his nose started bleeding nonstop.
Oh my gosh.
And he's on blood thinners for other health reasons. So I was like, okay, we need to definitely leave the city. And that really helped clear the mind, get away from all the panic, the sirens, the noise, the smoke, the people texting frantically. And, I remember reaching out to some close friends saying, I'm just going to take a break right now and disconnect. And I just want you to let you know that this is what I'm doing. But as soon as I'm well enough, I will be back in touch. And I think it happens with a lot of people that are very intense and very passionate and can do, the ability to multitask, that we have these moments where we also kind of like crash, and we need to just rest up and regain that. So also people get good rest, good sleep, because when you don't get good sleep, everything starts off on the wrong foot, and it makes life that more harder for everyone around you, including your own immediate family. And often we our own family tends to take a lot of the brunt of it, and I feel like that's very unfair, because it's almost like we take advantage of, well, they're stuck with us, so they're not going to go anywhere. Right. And that's really not how it should be. So I think we should also start modeling, treating our people we work with, our coworkers and members of our staff, the way, our family, the way we treat our coworkers and staff, as if you had, human resources there monitoring. And then another time was right actually before I fell pregnant with my son. I didn't know I was, and this would have been a very dark time in my life where, my heart was broken. I felt very disoriented. One of my brothers had, been arrested for something in Florida, and there was a lot of things that were happening, and I felt very took it very to heart. And so I remember being in the hospital and thinking, gosh, I'm still here, and I'm like, maybe this is God's plan or Mother Nature. They need me to be here. I have a greater purpose in life. And I really do believe that. I mean, there have been many times where I'm like, wow, I survived that, or I managed to get off that plane in one piece, and I wasn't even flying the plane,
Oh my God, yes.
And you wonder, right? Why does that happen? Why was I spared? Like my friend Arturo, his house, his stood in Altadena. His garage burned down, part of his pool area and the surrounding bushes, but his house still stood. Yet everyone else is on the block.
Yeah, we have
gone.
somebody from here, their house burned down too. So that works here. So
It's everyone I know, someone in their life was affected and lost, or at least one or two people. Right. So, those things can bring us down. And I just think we have to find a way to pull on our strength. My son is like my rock. My partner, my husband now, is also my rock. And I also feel like it reaches a point where you just kind of like get too exhausted from repeating the same patterns in life, or falling into the same bad habits or poor decisions, and that you find a way to pull your head out of the gutter, as it were, and just keep putting one foot in front of the other and helping. I do a lot of I try to do a lot of work through my church, Oasis LA, and other nonprofit organizations, not just Chirla, but Esperanza Community Housing Corps, Planned Parenthood, all these other, Habitat for Humanity.
Wow.
There's so many nonprofits out there that need our help. And I tell people, when you are in those low moments, if you could just find a way to get yourself to a place where you could volunteer, even if it's just for a half day or a day that you have free, you will find a way to maybe even feel someone else's pain for a moment and just let go of it's okay, just let go of your pain that feels so intense, so overwhelming at that time.
That's
and then I also tell people, go out. It's hard, but sometimes just go out and be surrounded by other human beings. You don't have to talk to them. You can just sit quietly, have a little coffee or tea or a cup of water for free. It doesn't have to cost you anything at a cafe, but you're surrounded by other human
energy
beings
around you.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow,
and so it's kind
great.
of like it gets you starting to think and not think, okay, this is it. I'm done. I'm gonna check out and stuff like that. So and I just want to be very clear. I don't say any of this lightly. I'm not proud of any of the stuff that happened at those low moments in my life, but they've all been lessons and stepping stones that have helped me come out from those dark places. And I think as fellow artists, that many of us are, or that we're blessed to be in this life, that we struggle with that a lot.
Yes.
And some people may not be as open about it, but now, as I've reached this age, I feel like if I can help someone else, another woman of color, another woman who has had to struggle, or it has taken them this long, over 40, 45, to make it, which is unfortunate. A lot of the people you see getting awards now, even women that are nominated for directors of photography, like Mandy Walker, just 2 years ago, she didn't win, but she's up there in age. She's not in her 20s. I'll tell you that. I'm not going to say how old, but I know from having worked on amazing commercials with her and shooting cars better than most guys that I know shoot commercials that are only known for shooting cars.
Yes.
And the same with Ellen Kurz, who worked with Spike Lee. So it's unfortunate that even someone like Ellen Kurz, it takes her 60s something to make it finally as a director, when she started off directing documentaries. A lot of people don't know this. And Kate Winslet, award-winning BAFTA winner, gave her the opportunity, but even then she had to fight with investors. She shared this at a Women in Film event, that she had to fight with investors and she's an Academy Award winner. She comes from a family of actors. She's from a nice upper class in the UK, and very nice person, but nonetheless in a very privileged place, you would think, right? You'd say. So she had to even convince some investors of why it was important to do a film on Lee, the incredible photographer who documented all those things that happened in the Holocaust. So that just goes to show you still how much we've come far, but how much farther we have to go still.
Yes, so much.
And I will never stop advocating for that and really shining the light on the areas that need to be exposed.
Thank you.
And where we still need to fight, not just for women's rights. This is for human rights, period.
Right, exactly.
Being a feminist, even back in my day, even before my day, like Gloria Steinem day, that was for equality. It was just, we wanted equal pay. We wanted to be able to have time off when we get pregnant, or when we choose to, now in Spain they even have a sick for when you get your period, when you go and menstruate, which that's a good thing to have, because you can't no puedes rendir, like you can't be as productive when you're in so much pain. That's like you run a marathon, you're cramping all over the next day because you didn't stretch, or you didn't do your bio freeze, or take
how are you
going to
do it again that day?
So you need to take a damn rest.
Right,
It's
exactly.
okay.
Yes,
Take a day of
exactly.
rest. You'll do better the next day, you know?
And that advice is going to help so much people pull themselves out. Even like how you said, sometimes you just have to go out in public, even if you don't talk to somebody. That little thing can change somebody so much, just even if you don't talk to somebody, even if you're just drinking water. That's very powerful. So thank you for sharing. It's really gonna
absolutely. And it can happen to anyone. Even just this weekend, a friend of mine reached out that I'd known since we did our exchange year abroad, and we met in St. Petersburg. She went to Georgetown. I was at Sarah Lawrence, but now she has a daughter. She's an only child, just like my son. And she was telling me she doesn't want to go back to Harvard. I can't believe it. She took already a gap year. Why is she not? And I said, listen, I'm going to give you the name of 4 different resources. You're going to call, Airport Marina Counseling. You're going to call Maple Counseling. And I just gave them all out, right? Wow. Wilshire Valley Center Therapy. There's so many places that are nonprofit that work on a sliding scale that take whatever insurance or not take whatever insurance. You file a claim or you get someone to do that for you. Or if you're on, government assistance, they also honor that as well. So you just have to find ways. I believe in connecting people with the right resources to help them out. And she eventually did go back. She did her midterm yesterday. She was a little late to it. But, I told her you need to really make sure that your daughter follows through with the therapy, because it's just a Band-Aid for now. Me talking to her is only going to do so much. Right. But everyone has to do the work and the work on themselves.
Right. That's right.
Like I say, we're all work in progress.
Most definitely. Yes, definitely. Perfect. And then thank you for sharing that, and just where do you see yourself in the next 5 years, because you've already done so much.
Oh my gosh. Well, I would like to have more cushioning in the company in terms of like for rainy season. So like what we just had now with the fires, and prior to that with the strike, and then the post-strike. People always forget what the post-strike is like. I remember the first strike SAG did back in the early 2000s, like right before the millennium happened, and everyone thought, the world's going to end. And that was huge, because we ended up already back then taking a lot of work to Canada and taking a lot of work to Mexico. And that was in 1990. I was only 2 years out of college by then. And so people were already like stressing, oh my gosh, they're going to go and have Canada do animation instead of hiring real live actors, So when we have those periods of drought in the business, I think it's very important to have that cushioning so that you can sustain yourself for a long time. So I think that really would be it. And the ability to grow the company so that I can, instead of having people work freelance, have them on in a salaried position where they're having their benefits, they're getting their 401k, they're getting their dental, I want to be able to provide what a government normally should, what our United States of America should, and we're, at risk of losing in many ways, sadly, with the new administration that we currently have. So those things I think are really important to continue to fight for, that they're there for a reason. There's safety net to help people. And it shouldn't be up to individuals who own companies, small businesses, minority owned, to have to fork out all of that. That's a big, a big expense in addition to your insurance too, that you have to carry. And we all know insurance is, quadrupled over the past couple of years. So I really just hope for more wealth and abundance.
Love it. I see it.
That provision, provision to hold on longer in those periods of drought.
Love that. Oh my gosh, I love that so much.
Nadia, you've been so amazing. I can't believe it's been almost this long, but I really enjoy the conversation. You have so much knowledge.
Yeah, so much. Like, it's so amazing.
You too, when you're, a Scorpio like me, you're deep, you're intense, you pose very good questions. I have to say, I was a little nervous. I didn't know what questions to expect, but I kept telling myself, Nadia, you need to trust the process and trust Mike and Ellie. They know what they're doing. They've been doing this. Look how many, almost 1 million followers.
Oh my God,
Let's make it 1 million.
Let's make it 1 million.
On, let's make it 1 million. And TikTok as well. Let's make it.
We will be there.
Guys, thank you for coming and watching our video. We really appreciate you, Nadia, being here with us
today.
Thank you. Definitely follow her. Nadia Films.
Yes, Nadia Films.
Use your last name one more time.
Nadia Films _ Nadia Vouktchenvitch. And the website's nadiafilms.com. And our new division, the Creative Collective, is Creative Collective -US.
Love it.
So please visit us, and thank you again.
Thank you. We love you so much. We're gonna have to do a part 2 because we have so many more questions.
Oh yes, for sure.
So we'll have part 2 soon.
Absolutely.
And we love you so much for being here. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.